Okay, so let's go over the pieces that we're going to need for this pattern. You're going to need, for your main panels, you have 2 exterior and 2 lining pieces. And then for your angled front pocket, again, 2 exterior and 2 lining pieces. Now for my exteriors, I'm using vinyl. For my lining, I'm using a water-resistant canvas. I am using an industrial machine to sew this, so that's why I am good with vinyl. If you don't have an industrial, I recommend staying away from vinyls and sticking more to the cotton wovens or the canvas weight material. And then when you cut your interfacing, make sure you cut it down by 1/2 inch all the way around to keep it well out of the way of the seam allowance. Okay, you will also have your exterior base, your lining base, and then you will have your zipper pocket pieces. I have 2 pieces here. And then if you are adding a slip pocket so that we can put our tools in there, you will also need 2 more of these. So you'll need 4 total of that. And then you have your Decoville Heavy, which is your stabilizer for your base. You could also use Peltex, just some form of firm stabilizer that you want for your base. In addition to the material, you will also need a zipper pull, a length of strap webbing, and a grommet if you are going to be adding the grommet for the yarn project hole. Okay, that's it. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we have to do is we have to take our exterior base, flip it over so it is wrong side up, take our piece of stabilizer, we are going to center it on the back of this panel, so centered left to right and top to bottom. You want to fuse this together. Once you get that done, let's go to the sewing machine and we'll start putting it together. Okay, so the first thing we're going to work on is our front slip pocket. So you're going to take 1 exterior and 1 lining, and you're going to lay them right sides together. Okay, then you're going to sew down each of these angled cuts here on either side according to the seam allowance provided in the pattern instructions. Okay, once that is sewn, we are now going to turn the panel through so it is right sides out, wrong sides together. And then rolling out that seam so that it's pressed out nice and flat. You're going to top stitch down this angled side. In top stitching, I always top stitch at about 1/8 of an inch. Okay, then we're going to do the same thing to the other angled side. Pressing out that seam. And then top stitch down this angled side. Okay, so that is how that angled pocket is looking. Top stitch down both sides. Now we're going to repeat the process to make the other angled pocket. So with your pieces right sides together, you're going to line up those angled sides, sew according to the seam allowance, and then we're going to flip it out and top stitch down both sides. Okay, now that we have both pockets, let's grab our main exterior pieces. So that is our two, I'm using vinyl in this version. We're going to lay the pocket on top of that. So lining up the sides and the bottom, I'm just going to add some clips in place here on the side. I'm going to add one along the top and maybe add two along the bottom. Okay, so that's how that looks. You can baste all the way around. I think for me, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to baste along the top, and then I'm going to baste down these two short sides. Okay, so that pocket is now basted on to the exterior panel. We're going to repeat the process to do the other side. So lining up the sides and the bottom, I'm going to add a clip there, and then across the top. All right, now both of our pockets are done. We're ready to attach our bottom base to our two exterior panels. Okay, so to do that, we're going to take one of our exterior panels. We're going to take our base, flip it over so they are right sides together, and we're going to line up this bottom edge. I'm going to add a few clips to help hold it while I'm sewing. Okay, and then we're going to sew across according to the seam allowance that is provided in the pattern. Okay, and now we're going to flip it over and do the same thing to the other side. So with your other exterior panel, we're going to take our base, flip it over so it's right sides together, lining up that bottom edge, clip it in place, and sew according to the seam allowance. Okay, one thing that I'm going to do here before we put the sides together is I'm just going to trim back this corner a little bit. So just trimming it on an angle. If you have any overhang, like I have a little overhang here, I'm going to trim that off. And that's going to help to keep out some of the bulk in the seam allowance on the side when we try to sew up the side. So sewing up the side is where you're going to have, if you're going to have any struggle with your machine, that's where it's going to be. That side seam can get a little thick. So anything we can do like this to help get some of that bulk out of the way is great. It's great. That's what we want. Okay, so now what we need to do is take our panel and we're going to take the tops of our panels, so where our two top pockets meet, we're going to line those up, and I'm just going to put a clip there just to hold it in place. So what it looks like, you have this little triangle from the side, and that's exactly what you want. So I'm going to clip at the top, and then coming down here to the base, we're going to push the base up and in towards the inside of the bag. And I'm going to add a clip down here. Down here at this part, this is where you're going to struggle. If your machine's going to struggle at all, it will be right here. So I recommend, if you're using interfacing, make sure that you cut your interfacing down by at least 1/2 inch all the way around the sides so that it keeps it out of that seam allowance for you. And then depending on what type of machine you have, if you have an industrial, I'm working on a Sailrite fabricator, so it shouldn't struggle too much for me since it's an industrial going through the side seam. But if you have a domestic or a semi-industrial, just be mindful of that when you're choosing your fabrics. I would stay away from vinyls if you were using a domestic and stick more towards the cotton wovens or the canvas materials. Another thing you could do is up your needle, so bring it up to either a jean needle or a leather needle, and that could also help you get through that side seam. Okay, so once we have those side seams clipped, we're going to sew down the side according to the seam allowance. All right. And I'm going to add, this is optional, but I'm going to add a second row of stitching just to the outside of my first line. So what that's going to do is going to help two things. It's going to help give that side seam a little strength, especially down here at the base where the layers are so thick. And then it's also going to help to hide those stitches from the outside. Sometimes when you're working with vinyl and you turn it through, you could have stitches that want to show, but doing it this way, it should help to hold those tight so that they don't show on the outside. All right, now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Alright, so you can see my 2 rows of stitching on both sides there. Now what I'm going to do, just to help a little bit, is to cut down my side seam, the seam allowance, by about half, but only until I get up to about an inch or so from the top, and then I'm just going to taper it off to the outside because I want the larger seam allowance here. That's going to help me have a nice seam when a nice seam to meet the lining to when I put the exterior and the lining together. So again, I'm just going to cut off about half of the seam allowance. There we go, up until the top. All right, so now that is, believe it or not, our exterior is done. The next thing we need to do is we need to grab our piece of strap webbing and we're going to attach it to the sides before we move on to the lining. Okay, for my strap webbing, I am using this woven strap. So I'm going to use some fray check and I'm just going to put some right on the ends and hopefully that will help. Since it's woven, it might want to try to fray. So I'm going to try to help it so that it doesn't want to fray. The other thing I'm going to do, and this also is optional, is just stitch back and forth. Right at the end of the strap. So that should also help to hold any of those, the stitches should help to hold that end of the strap together. Hopefully. Fingers crossed. I don't always do this, but considering this is kind of a loose weave on this webbing, I just want to be a little extra safe on this one. Okay, so to attach the webbing, if you have a right side and a wrong side, you want to put it inside of your bag here so that your right side of your webbing is against the right side of your exterior. And I'm going to butterfly, if you can see, I don't know if you can see this, I'm butterflying open this seam so that it lays nice and flat. And then, let me grab my ruler here. I'm going to let this overhang by about 1/2 of an inch. Let's see, right now it's about 1 inch. Actually, let's just do 1 inch because that will give us the option to add rivets when we turn it through. So for this one, let's let it overhang by about 1 inch. Okay, I'm going to clip that in place. And then taking it over to the machine, making sure that that side seam is still butterflied open. So I've pressed it down against the machine. I'm just working my bag in here. I'm just going to baste and make sure that's still butterflied open. Okay. And then I'm just going to baste the strap in place here at the top of the bag. Excuse me. All right, so I centered the strap over that center side seam, butterflied it open. Now making sure my strap is not twisted, I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. So butterflying this side seam open here, and then letting this come up about 1 inch. Clip in place to hold it. And then I'm going to baste this one in place as well. All right, so that's how that looks. Our strap is on the inside. That's all done. Now we can set our exterior to the side and let's work on the lining. Okay, so let's go ahead and start on our lining. So the first side that we're going to make is going to have the slip pocket for our crochet hooks or our knitting needles. But the first thing we need to do is we need to take our 2 pockets, our 2 pieces here. We're going to put them right sides together, and then we're going to sew all the way around, leaving a turning hole here at the bottom. Okay, to make our slip pocket here, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to stitch, and let's use 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. We're going to stitch all the way around, but we're going to leave a turning hole at the bottom. Okay, back stitching at the beginning and the end. I left probably about 3 inches, I'd say, about a 3-inch gap here at the bottom. And now we're just going to, as soon as I find what I did with my scissors, we're going to trim those corners. Here we go, they're right behind me. Okay, so we're just going to trim these corners. And that should help our corners to turn out nicely when we turn it through. if you have a turning tool that you like to use, go ahead and use that. I'm going to try to use these scissors that I have here. Actually, hang on, let me grab my favorite turning tool, which just so happens to be a knitting needle. So I like to use that to poke out the corners. So just go slow, be careful, because you don't want to poke through. Okay, once you get your corners poked out, we're going to fold this bottom edge in. And this is our turning hole here. And you want to make it line up with your seam. So turn it in by the seam allowance. Match up those bottom edges. I'm going to take it over, give it a nice press, and then I will come back and we can attach it to our lining panel. Okay, once we get it pressed, we're just going to find the center. So I'm going to fold this in half and give it a light finger press so I can see where the center of that is. And then I'm going to do the same thing for my lining panel. And this is going to help me center my panel left to right once I get it lined up. And then let's measure down about, let's do 2 inches down. So 2 inches down from the top, which is about almost 1 3/4 up from the bottom. Okay, so once yours is square, you can use some pins to hold it in place. I'm just gonna use my hand. Hopefully it doesn't shift. Kind of living dangerously here. Hopefully it doesn't shift while I'm sewing. And then I'm just going to sew around this outside edge. Okay, so once you have that attached, now you have the option to decide what kind of pocket you want. Of course, you could have a full slip pocket here. That's up to you. If you wanted to add some slots where you could put in a crochet hook or a knitting needle, we can measure that. And I recommend making those marks about 1 inch from the stitch line. So I'm just going to line this up. I'm going to line my ruler up with the side of the panel. Now you could also measure it and use some sort of marking tool. I'm just going to use my ruler as a guide. But if you didn't want to use a ruler and you would rather mark your lines and then sew on them, feel free to do that. Okay, so there's your first one. You could put a pair of scissors in there. You could put knit and needle, fits perfectly. You could also put a pen. So that's how that fits. You can figure out how many across you would like to make. I might make this one a little wider so that I could actually put this pair of scissors and have it go all the way in. So measuring that, and this one, like I said, it's really your personal preference as to where you would like your pockets to be. So actually, I think what would work really well is if I made 2 more of these, and then I could have one wider pocket. So I could have pen, hooks, scissors. I think that will be really good. So I'm moving this in by 1/8 of an inch just because I know that my foot takes a little bit of space. So I'm not lining it up at the full inch, but when I sew it, it should be 1 inch. Hopefully that makes sense. So I actually lined my ruler up at 7/8 of an inch over. You know, I put it on the 7/8 inch line on that first line that I made. And then that way, when you measure it, I don't know if you can see, then it's a full inch that way. All right, so I'm going to make one more here. And again, however you measure your pockets, the configuration is totally up to you. Whatever you're going to use this for, however it would work best for you, do that. It's totally customizable. So look how cute that little pocket is just for the scissors. And I can have a pen, a crochet hook or two, because sometimes, you know, depending on your project, you might need a couple different sizes for what you're working on. So that is going to be perfect. Okay, so that is our slip pocket. Now let's move on to working on the other side, which is the zipper pocket. Okay, to create our zipper pocket, we're going to need our other lining piece, our zipper, and our 2 pocket pieces. So first things first, let's go ahead and put our zipper pull on our zipper. All right, there we go. And I probably should have done this beforehand. That would have made it a little bit easier to thread it through, I think, but just singeing the ends of the zipper tape with a lighter will help to prevent any fraying on those ends there. Okay, now we have the zipper attached. So what we need to do is we need to take our 1 lining panel and our 1 pocket piece. And if you are using directional fabric, make sure it's going in the right direction. We're going to flip it over and measure. We want it centered. So actually, I'm going to do this first. Let's fold some center marks here. Okay, we want it centered, and there are measurements in the pattern for how far down you want to measure here, and then how far down you want to measure here. So I'm going to do that off camera, and then I will come back. I'll draw the box off camera, and I'll show you our next step. All right, so once that box is drawn on, what we're going to do is we're going to stitch all the way around, right on that line, all the way around the box. Okay, once that is stitched on, what we need to do is we need to cut the center of the box. So you can use a rotary cutter. Another way is just fold it in half. Use your scissors to make a little snip to get started. And we're just cutting a line down the center of the box towards each side end. And we're stopping about a 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch or so from the end. And then we're going to snip out to the corner, getting as close as we can to the corner, into that corner without cutting our stitches. We're going to do that on both sides. Okay, so that's how that looks. We've got that opening, we've got this little slit, triangle slit here, and then we're going to turn this pocket through to the inside. So this is going to create our zipper opening for our pocket. Okay, and this part might take a little bit of work to finagle it around. I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine or to the iron board. I'm going to give it a nice press to hold it down nice and flat, and then I'll be back to show how we install the zipper. Okay, once that is pressed, what we need to do now is we need to attach the zipper. So with your zipper pull to the left when open and closed, so you want the flat end of your zipper pull to the right, and then the rounded part where it will open and close to the left. Using some double-sided tape, I'm just going to lay it along the long straight edge here of the zipper. Okay, and then removing the paper backing. What we need to do now is we need to center the zipper tape over the hole that we just created in the lining panel. So what I like to do is I just flip it back, kind of center it this way, and then come straight on top and center the panel top to bottom. Get your zipper pull inside so it's not left out. Okay, so that's how that looks. Now what we need to do is come to the sewing machine, and we are going to sew it on. Now what I like to do is I like to leave some long threads. So let me pull some, there we go, some extra long threads here. And I am going to start here. I'm not going to backstitch because I'm going to end up pulling my threads through to the back side, and that leaves a nice clean finish here on the front side. So just holding those threads and sewing at about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. All right, and then sewing right up to that first hole, not back stitching. Now we're gonna again pull off some long threads. Okay, so we have 2 on the front, 2 on the back. We're gonna flip it over, and if you pull one, I don't know if you can see this, but there's a little, let me see, what can I use to pull this up with? Maybe these little snips. There's a little loop that comes up. So you just want to pull that through to the back side. Now using the other string, pull the other string, find that little loop, and pull that one through. Okay, so now all of your 4 strings are pulled through to the back side. So I'll split them 2 and 2, and then I'll just tie a couple knots. Usually I tie about 3 knots just to tie off those ends nice. One more. There we go. You could add a little dab of glue on the thread ends if you wanted to, but there you go. And now with it pulled through to the back side, you can't tell where the stitching started or stopped. So that's just a nice way to finish it. Okay, now flipping it back over, we're going to take our other pocket piece, flipping that over so that it is right sides together with that first pocket piece. We're going to clip the sides and the top together. And then we're going to stitch around the 3 sides, leaving the bottom open because the bottom is where we're going to be turning it through. So we definitely need to leave that open. We need to back stitch at the beginning and at the end, making sure that this part is strong because, like I said, that's where we're going to be turning it through, and we want to make sure that the stitches don't pull loose. So flipping it over, I'm going to pull this panel back to the side, and starting here, according to the seam allowance in the instructions, there are standard seam allowances that I provide in the pattern instructions. That if I don't say what the seam allowance is, you just know that it's the standard seam allowance. I'm just going to back stitch over the end of that zipper a couple times. Okay, once I get to the end, I'm leaving my needle down. I'm flipping. Now, once I turned the fabric, I'm flipping the top down. So I'm only sewing on the zipper pocket. Okay. Now to the last side. Again, I'm going to back stitch over the end of that zipper a couple times. And then stitch all the way down, back stitching at this end, and there we go. Okay, so there is how our pocket is looking. You can test it out. Make sure everything's looking good. Make sure this bottom is left open and you have double stitched or back stitched at the beginning and at the end. Okay, so there is our zipper pocket. Now let's grab our slip pocket and our lining base, and we'll put these together. Okay, so what we need to do first with our lining base, there is one side that is 1/2 inch longer than the other side. So that's the side that you want to work on. We're going to mark the centers, and you could use a pen. I'm just going to cut a teeny little snip here in the center so that I can easily find my center. And I'm going to do the same in the bottom of each of the lining panels. So again, just finding that center. And the bottom of the slip pocket. All right, so let's start with our zipper pocket. So taking the center of our lining panel and the center of our base, we are going to match those up. You can clip them in place if you want. Actually, let me just clip so I can show you what we're going to be doing. I'm going to mark 1/2 of an inch in on each side. So this is just along the base. I'm marking on the base, the bottom of our panels here, marking on the base 1/2 inch in from each side, and that's where we're going to be starting and stopping our stitching. So we're not going all the way to the end. We are using our lining seam allowance. Again, just starting and stopping right at that 1/2 of an inch mark. Okay, like that. Now we're going to do the same thing to attach the other side. So with the bottom of our slip pocket, the other side of our lining base, we're going to match up those center marks. Let's go ahead and clip those in place. And then we need to mark those lines again. So 1/2 inch in. Okay, and that is our start and stop. So same thing on this side, lining, seam allowance. All right, so our base is attached. What we need to do now is just make a couple little snips before we attach the sides. So on our lining panel, right where our stitching started and ended, we're going to snip up to the stitch line. So we're only snipping the lining panel. We're not snipping the base. And we're going to do that on each side. Just right where your stitch line started and stopped, snip up to the stitch line. And on the other side, again, just the lining panel, not the base. Snipping up to the stitch line. Okay, now that that is done, we are going to just let it naturally, it wants to fold in half towards the inside, just like our exterior did. We're going to line up these side seams. And at the top, we're going to sew according to we're going to start at the exterior seam allowance, and then we're going to increase to the lining seam allowance. So after about 1 inch down, just going to make sure my panels are lined up. After 1 inch down, I'm going to increase to my lining seam allowance. And that is just going to help keep our lining so that it doesn't get too baggy inside. Nobody wants a saggy, baggy lining. They want it to fit nicely. So we are keeping with our exterior seam allowance at the top, and that's going to help the top of our bag match up perfectly. And then by increasing it a little bit, it's going to help our lining to fit nice and snug. Okay, so both of those side seams are sewn. Now what we're going to do is trim it back by half. until we get up to about an inch or so again, just like we did on the exterior. I'm just going to taper it off to the side so that I have the full seam allowance here, which is going to help when I attach it to the exterior. It'll just make it easier. You could trim it all the way off, all the way up. You could trim it back. It just gives you a smaller seam allowance for matching up those side seams. So I like to leave the full seam allowance here at the top. Okay, so here's how it's looking so far. Now we've got to attach these side bottoms. So pulling it open, and because we made that snip, that should help our panel to line up pretty much exactly how we want it to. The corners might be a little bit tight or a little bit wonky, and that's just because you're coming in there right to that like 90-degree angle, and you've got this corner piece here that is not necessary. It's kind of in the way, so you just want to lay it nice and flat straight across that edge, and then taking it to the machine, we're going to start right in that corner. So that's right where we snipped. We're going to start right there and stitch all the way across. And I'm butterflying open this side seam. And let me just pull this one out that way so I can see. And then I'm coming right up to this corner, stitching, stopping right in that corner. Okay, so that's how that corner looks. Now we're going to do the same thing to the other side. Again, pulling that out, let me butterfly open the side seam. I'm going to add a couple clips just to help hold it. Okay. And then, again, just like on the other side, we're going to sew straight across, starting at that corner mark and coming across to the other corner mark. Okay, so that's how that looks. Our base does have a bit of a extra seam allowance here. It's pretty square here at the bottom. What I like to do now is just trim off by about half all the way around this base. And that's just going to help to keep some of the bulk down on the inside of the bag. Especially considering the construction of this bag with that unique corner side, corner angle triangle. I'm not sure what you want to call it. That unique little side feature on the exterior of the bag. There is already some bulk in there, so we're just doing what we can to help it so that it lays down nicely. Okay, so there is your lining. It's so cute with this bee fabric. And then on that side is where we have all the pockets, the slip pockets, zipper pocket on that side. Okay, last thing we need to do here is unzip our pocket because that's where we're going to be turning the whole thing through. We need to turn this bag right side out. It doesn't have to be perfect because it's going to get squished inside of your exterior pieces, and with that strap webbing there, it might get squished anyway, so it's good. Alright, so once our lining is turned out, let's go ahead and grab our exterior. Okay, so taking our exterior and our lining, so our exterior is right sides in, wrong sides out. Our lining is right sides out, wrong side in. We're going to slip our lining into our exterior, just tucking it inside. And then, as suspected, the strap does make it a little bit trickier to get everything lined up. So just do your best there. We're going to match up that side seam. And I'm going to clip on either side of the strap, on this side. And then coming around to the other side, same thing. Center those seams. And if you notice this little bit of duct tape here on the side, I did go back after I put this together. I did go back and attach my little Beautifully Made bag charm. I attached it to the side seam. I offset it a little bit so it didn't go through those stitches, but this is where the hardware is on the inside, and I just put a piece of duct tape on there to help protect that fabric, to help protect the lining fabric, I should say, from the exterior, from that hardware rubbing against it. Okay, so we're just clipping all the way around the top. We're going to do that to both sides. Okay, once we get that clipped all the way around the top like that, let's see if I can get it in the camera at a good angle. So it's clipped all the way around. We are going to take it to the machine and we are going to sew all the way around this top edge according to our exterior seam allowance. Let's see if I can just get the bag under. Hopefully you guys can see. I'll do my best to try to squish the bag down so you can see, but I'm just stitching straight across right around the top of this bag. Just adding a couple back stitches along the strap to help give it a little extra strength. Like I mentioned earlier, I might go back after the bag is all put together. I'll see how it looks. Might add a couple rivets along the side where this will meet on the inside, just to give that strap a little extra strength. It should be pretty good in there, but you know, also sometimes you just add rivets because they look nice. You just want it to add a little bling, a little bit of interest. So I might do it for that reason too. All right, now that that is stitched all the way around, I'm just going to trim my strings, and then this is where we are going to turn the bag through. So this is probably the hardest part of the whole bag, and depending on what materials you chose could make it easier or harder. So let me just finger stretches. All right, so reaching in, and it will come through, believe me. You may think there's no way this bag is coming through this opening. Just work it. Work it slow. It will come through. There we go. Got the toughest part through. Now we just need to finish working it out. Okay, so once you get that turned through, you can stick your hand in there. We want to push out the corners, push out the base. You will have to do some work here on these corners. So once you get everything turned through, you can feel on the inside where your stabilizer base ends. And that's where you want to have your corner start, if that makes sense. So you're pushing out these sides right up to that base. The more time you spend getting this corner looking nice and everything laying nice and flat, the better your end result. So just take some time. You got one hand on the inside so you can grab the seam allowance, move it around, do whatever you need to do. It does get a little hot in there. Not gonna lie. With your hand that's inside the bag, especially if you're not using breathable materials, like I've got vinyl, so it is a little warm inside that bag. Okay, I'm just trying to get here, get to these corners, get everything laying nice the way they should be. Let's see, there's where my stabilizer ends, so I want to try to get that corner right up to the stabilizer. Same on this side. Okay, I'm just going to just push the rest of this inside for a minute. I just want to see how it's all looking. Make sure, yay, my strap is not twisted, so that's good. Okay, now I'm going to, I gotta trim some of those off, but that's okay. I'm going to clip around the top of the bag here, just rolling the seams to try to get them right up to the top. And there's where, if you can see, that's where I attached my, I don't know if you can see it in this light. That's where I attached my beautifully made, just a little bit off center. It's fine. I could have attached it here, but I thought that might kind of take away from how pretty this vinyl is. So I wanted to put it somewhere on the black, and I just didn't want it to be stuck on the side, you know what I mean, because it kind of curves around like that. So at least with it on the side, I know it's going to be there and it won't be like, you know what I mean, caught up here on this corner. Okay. And it's gonna be adorable. It's gonna be so cute. So cute. Okay. So here is how this is looking. I think, let me just trim these off. I think what I'm going to do first is I'm going to top stitch, and then I'm going to come back in, put my hand inside the pocket again, just to make sure all of these corners are pressed out and laying exactly how I want them to. Then we will close up the close up the zipper pocket. Okay, so what I always like to top stitch from the exterior. And I don't have a cylinder arm yet. That's on my wish list. So I'm just going to kind of push this around. So let's see, you know what? Let me just push it all the way through. That'll be easier. I got to go in there and rework it anyway, so. That just, you could stitch from the inside. Personally, I like stitching from the outside, so that's the way I'm doing it. All right, so starting over here, I'm going to start, I always like to start on the side, kind of where my strap is. But actually, I think because it's black and my webbing is white, I'm sorry, my thread is white, I'm going to come over here and start right on the corner of the slip pocket, because I can start and stop, you know, like do a couple back stitches anyway, because I want to do some back stitches right where the vinyl, where the slip pocket meets the exterior. So I don't know, let me see if I can see, if you can see right here where the pocket starts and stops. You want to add a couple, just like 1 or 2 little back stitches, just to give it a little extra strength, because you're going to be going in and out right there. So, and I think that also will hide my start and stop. And again, for your top stitching, do whatever works best for you. If you like stitching from the inside, go for it. I prefer stitching from the outside, so I didn't have to turn my bags inside out. Okay, and I'm coming around to that other slip pocket. So once I get my zipper pocket out of the way, once I get to that vinyl, right there, right as soon as I get that one stitch onto that slip pocket, I do that one back stitch. And then right as I'm about to get to the other end of that pocket, I will do one more at that end. There we go. And almost done here. Again, right on that. Here we go. That should be nicely hidden right there at that pocket. All right, so let me just trim these stitches and I'll turn it back through, show you what I did. All right. Now I will say that the pattern does allow, or it does provide instructions for doing a drop-in lining. And especially if you have struggles with hand strength, a drop-in lining I would recommend doing. Now the drop-in lining will work for this basket version, and it will work for the recessed zipper as well as the crossbody. It will not work for the pouch because of the nature of how pouches are assembled. You can't really do a drop-in lining with that. right. Almost. Guys, I'm so excited for how this is looking. It's going to be so awesome. So much fun. Okay, so the last thing now I'm doing is I'm just turning in the seam allowance on our zipper pocket. So I'm just turning it in probably about 1/2 of an inch. You could do anywhere from 1/4 inch to 1/2 of an inch. And I'm just going to clip it in place. And then we need to sew across the bottom of this pocket. And we want to be as close to the edge as we can so that it won't interfere too much when we turn it through. So I usually like to sew it at about 1/16 of an inch from the end. So pretty much as close as you can get to the edge, still catching both sides of the pocket. We're just going to sew straight across. Just straighten out this end here. All right. Push that pocket back on the inside. Make sure it's laying nice and flat. All right. Zip that closed. Push the lining out. So cute. Okay, I'm going to take this over back to the cutting table. I'll go back to the other camera angle and then I'll show you what we got. All right, so here is our bag. So you can see what it looks like on the inside. We've got the zipper pocket over here. On this side, we've got the slip pockets. We got a nice open inside, nice flat base. And then from the outside, we've got this little tag off to the side. And then since this is kind of towards the front here, I'm going to call this the front. So on this side is where I'm going to mark my grommet. Now, if you're not adding a grommet, you don't have to worry about this. You're done. But if we want to use this for a cute little yarn bag, let's figure out where we want the grommet hole to be. And I'm just eyeballing this. I think the way the bag will sit, I think right there would be a good spot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my silver marking pen. I'm going to trace the inside of this circle, the inside of this grommet. So there's where I know that's what I have to cut away. Okay, so you can do a couple of options here for cutting away your hole. You could use scissors. You could use your seam ripper and poke through, come out to there, and then use your scissors and cut all the way around. You want to cut through both layers. Or you could have some dies, and this one fits this hole perfectly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to get my little hammer. And I have this disc here that I can use to put it down on the bottom side so that I don't cut through the other side of the bag. All right, so I will mute this part so you guys don't hear me banging away. All right, that is pretty close, so I'm just going to snip, use my scissors, and just snip this lining piece. There we go. All right, so that should give us our nice opening. I'm going to check here with the grommet to see how it's fitting. And I think it will be okay. It's going to be tight, but I'd rather have my hole for my grommet to be a little tight than way too loose. Because if it's too loose, then you run the risk of, having it pull out. So let me see if that'll hold for a second. Let me get my little clamp. Okay, I'm just going to reach over and squeeze it together. Hopefully I can reach all the way in there. Just checking all the way around to make sure it is seated correctly and sealed all the way. Let me see. I have 2 of these clamps, and I think this is a 2-clamp job. I just want to be able to grab both sides here. There we go. There are different kinds of grommets out there. They have the kind that you can twist. They have the kind that can screw on. This one is just a clamp. So there you go. Okay. Let me move some of this stuff out of the way. And I will link in the video descriptions, I will link to where I got these little dies, so that if you want to order some as well. There is a die in here that works perfectly with my Cine wallet. So if you're interested in that, that makes that wallet super easy. Okay. Oh, it's so cute. So cute. Oh my gosh. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And the bee on the inside. Okay, so as you can see on this side, we've got scissors. We've got a little pocket for the scissors. We can put a pen in there, crochet hook or 2. If you have, this is how, if you have a tall knitting needle, it will stick out about this far. Let's see. I'll turn it to the side so you can see. It sticks out pretty high. But if you laid it down like that, it wouldn't be so bad. But like I said, your knitting needle, pen, scissors, all that stuff right there. So easy access for the project you're working on. Take the scissors out, and then your yarn, you can stuff it inside and bring it through this little hole. And look at that. Perfect. Oh my gosh, it's so cute. It's so cute, you guys. It's so cute. All right, so there is the McCallie bag with a little grommet hole so that you can use it as a yarn project bag. I hope you guys enjoyed this video tutorial. If you make one, please tag me on social media and let me see what you made. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to my channel. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, and then let me know what other kinds of tutorials that you would like. And I hope everybody just has the most wonderful day. And you go sew something fun. Sew something fun, guys. Like that's what it should be, right? It shouldn't be stressful. It shouldn't be frustrating. It should be fun. So I hope you have fun today, and I hope you sew something fun.